come on up. Hello again, everyone. My name is Dennis Baker. I'm the Business Program Director. A big reason why we do these films is not only to enjoy independent film, but to encourage you, our audience members, to create your own work by hearing from people who've done it, survived, and want to share their story. So we're going to jump into that. First, have you guys introduce yourself?
I'm Erin Cipolletti, writer, actor, producer.
I'm Ryan.
Clap that out.
I'm Ryan Michael, the director and one of the producers.
Yeah. So first off, it takes an army, a tribe, a pack to make films happen. So we have some cast and crew in the audience you want to acknowledge.
Yeah, our lovely Josephine is in the back. Emma Griffin, beautiful Emma. I think that's it. We have probably some Kickstarter supporters in here as well. So a lot of thank you to them as well for being on the journey with us.
Totally, great. Let's jump right in. So we can't make a movie without a story and a script. So talk about how that came to be.
Well, I'm an actor, and I was doing all the things that you're supposed to do as an actor. Had an agent, manager, was training, was auditioning a lot, had a lot of near close calls, those heartbreaking ones. And to be honest, I just got really frustrated at feeling like I didn't have any control of my creative opportunities and my ability to tell a story. So I had a really great acting coach at the time who mentored me and really encouraged me to start writing. And so I started writing, took that frustration and turned it into writing. And it's fun.
So specifically this story, how did this one kind of come across your memory?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time because I knew I wanted to write something that I could be in. I didn't really necessarily know who I would play or anything like that, but I knew that I wanted to tell a story that was very different from the types of things that I was reading as an actor. A lot of times I was reading things that I was a girlfriend or love interest or the nerdy girl, and it just wasn't really anything that I felt like a lot of the girls and women in my life could relate to. So it just sort of came out of an idea of wanting to tell a story about two women and their relationship that wasn't something that I necessarily saw every day but would understand. And I started writing with another friend of mine who was an actor and writer at the time, but she decided to go work on another project. And so then I just took it back to the drawing board, and it turned into a lot darker, but more probably my style and voice was the darker sort of take on what that sort of friendship would be like. Somebody that was just so lonely that they created their own friend. Yeah.
Great. And then talk a little bit about the writing process. Did you sit down at certain times of the day and write, or is it just kind of came to be over a longer period of time? What was that process for you?
I had a couple ideas that I was working on all at the same time, but this was sort of the one that was constantly on me to write. And a lot of it was at later times of the night, and I actually was going through a pretty difficult time in my life, and so it was very therapeutic to have this story to turn to and have these characters that I fell in love with, and to write about them and do a lot of research into mental health and just just really exploring what that would be like, and a lot of late nights.
I'd like to say that I was privy through a lot of the writing process, and it's just an example of, as it was several times through the movie for anybody who's starting to write or have written or producing their feature film, how many times it's just on you to keep the lamp on. So there are times I remember seeing Erin, and it was just in a dark apartment with like one light on. It was like 2 a.m. She had a day job. She had other things going on, but this was what she had to do. And so to her credit, a lot of this film got made on the backs of like 1 or 2 people. Really just being like, oh, that's all I got. I have to. Like I can't stop. This is just what it takes.
Talk a little bit about the rewriting process. Who did you reach out to get feedback from, changes, things like that?
Well, he was brought on as the director pretty early, so he had a lot of feedback, a lot of go back, this isn't right, start over, and you're like, that's not what I want to hear. But also I had a lot of really good friends that I would bring over and do script readings with, Justin, I don't know if he's here, but he helped write a lot. There he is. Justin Olson, he did a lot of script readings for me. He's a great writer. Emma as well was staying with us and while we were doing some script readings and everything, and my sister. So I had a pretty good sounding board to help us sort of figure out what story I wanted to tell.
And then when in the process were you like, okay, I have something where we need to start talking to other people, start building a crew, start talking about this thing called pre-production? When was that kind of process for you guys?
I think what happened was we were actually, you know what it was? It was we were writing part of the script, and there was an event that we needed to have happen, and it was one thing, then it was another thing. We weren't really quite sure what we were going to do with it, and then we decided that to make the movie we wanted to make as best we couldn't do it in Los Angeles, unfortunately, because a lot of people here are just not impressed, you know, and so
Too
like
many locations. Too.
yeah. So like if you go to a store here and you're like, hey, we're making a movie, they're like, where's your money? You know, you go to a smaller town, you're, hey, we're making a movie, and they're like, oh my God, yes, here, take everything, my child, whatever you need, you know, and like, I mean, like kind of a true story,
Yeah.
but so in order to make the movie we got for the budget we had, we knew we had to shoot it somewhere familiar, but not in Los Angeles, and so it ended up being Cincinnati, it worked out really well. And one of the things Cincinnati has is a really good fireworks show, and we thought, well, we're getting nearish to July. Fireworks feel like a lot of what we're looking for between what Josephine's character is bringing for Claire, which is this sort of lost innocence, and fireworks kind of, you know, there's a lot there we can play with, and it's very visual. It's a beautiful scene we could build out. And so that's when we decided, oh, it should be fireworks. We should shoot in Cincinnati. And then all of a sudden we had a real date, and it was like a month we had to go, you know, so it was kind of a sprint from there. In fact, actually, I was in Ohio for about a month prior, doing what best we could for pre-production. And as we were going along, and maybe we'll touch on some of this stuff, but as we were going along and things were changing, I would call up Erin and go, you know how this character was like this? What if, you know, and you know, and so there was a lot of last minute rewrites and angry phone calls about, I can't believe this is, you know, because nobody wants to sit back in Los Angeles writing while the people are going off making movies, you know.
Give us a timetable. So you said you about had a month of pre-production. How long were you writing before kind of that month of pre-production to kind of get to that place?
From when it was the story that it is, I would say probably just under a year of writing it, working on it, on and off. But probably 2 years from the concept, the original concept.
Great. So then you start getting to pre-production. You kind of you're just like, okay, we're going to shoot here at this date, time frame, and everything. And you had your director. How did you start getting other people on board? Was it people you knew? Was it people you both knew? Kind of talk about that process of kind of getting your department heads and other people involved.
Yeah, we had first and foremost, because we were shooting in Cincinnati, and we both live in Los Angeles. We needed somebody on the ground. We needed a producer there who could, you know, meet in person and ask for in person, hey, we need your stuff, and can you give it to us for free or thereabouts. And we knew a person, actually, weirdly enough, there was somebody we had in mind, and she just came to my mind as soon as we started thinking about that. And I thought, Elizabeth, who played Angie, actually, the sister. And this was her first anything. I don't know if I should say that. I mean, it is true. She'd never done anything. And I thought, Elizabeth, oh my God, she would be great. And Erin, for some reason, said, absolutely, Elizabeth is the one. I call her up.
She just felt like a producer.
Yeah, I call her up, and she was 100% in. She's like, how did you know? I've always wanted to make movies. And you're like, I don't know. And so she's in this writing group, and she's very much, it was weirdly familiar for her to do this. I didn't realize how close she was to film. But and then from there we had another friend from San Francisco, Dan, who was another producer who was really, really great to have. And so we started with the producing team, and then from there just started getting production heads that were local and talented. The cinematographer was a hard one. I got lucky with Brad, who was in Michigan teaching, but he's actually from Chapman, but he moved to Michigan to teach, and I completely harassed him. And I was like, please, please, please come to this movie. You know, what can I do? And here's why you should do it. And he said yes. Actually, he said yes. He brought all of his crew and all the gear, and so and the camera, which was wonderful. Yeah, we have to shoot on the iPhone.
Nice. Talk about kind of a little bit of how did you guys raise some money, kind of how did you guys, that process?
When we first said, let's do this, I researched a lot of grants and things like that, found a couple, won a couple, so that sort of started the funding. And then it was also gave us a little bit of legitimacy, so we could then start a Kickstarter campaign and say, hey, look, we have a script, and we have the producing team and set, and we have a date, and we have a little bit of money. Go ahead and give us more. So that was terrible, but really humbling to have so many family and friends just come out and support, and then complete strangers just come out and support. So through the Kickstarter process, we then found a private financer as well that came on board. But I have to say, if you're going to make a movie, much better to do Kickstarter for post-production rather than production, because production at the end of the day was manageable in terms of how much we had to spend, but when you came to post-production, it was just so much money to finish the movie, and it's much easier to get people to sign on and give you money if you have something to show. So if you've already done Kickstarter for pre-production, you've kind of, burned those, well, not burned bridges, but you've tapped that well. Yeah. So it's, if you can find a financer in the beginning to help with production and then go to the Kickstarter for post-production, I feel like that would be a lot more successful and a lot easier and manageable. Luckily, we did get another financer to come in for post-production because they saw the film, and that's why, I say it's much easier. Because you can show them the movie, and if they like it, then they're absolutely more than willing to step in because you've already done a lot of the hard work and you have something to show for it.
And it's not, if I had heard that before making the movie, I'd have been like, okay, but I need the cameras and I need the lights and I need, all the cool stuff that I want to do. But so much of this movie was made in post, and it wasn't until we went through the different rounds of sound, and we have a fantastic editor. She was somebody who stayed in the trenches with me, doing all these different cuts to make the most of what we got, and we got good stuff. It was a lot of the good things we got were just in production, and we just got lucky with that, or very fortunate. But so much of the film was made in post that it is. I would highly recommend to any sort of first-time filmmaker starting out with their project is to do what you can to self-finance or get funding to do the production part of it, because not only is it so much easier to do Kickstarter once you have stuff to show, it's such a visual sort of thing to sell, so you'll be more successful, but also every penny will be spent and you will see it and hear it. It will be like, oh, I get it. There's a difference between that $5,000 thing and that $20,000 thing. Like there's a difference there that is volumes. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of filmmakers say you get one ask, so be careful when you use that one ask. So when it comes to Kickstarter.
You only get one. Yeah. You only get one time where people are like, yeah, I believe in you, and then you come back and like, all right, buddy,
Nice. How did you're an actor. You obviously, as a director, know actors. So talk a little bit about that casting process. Did you write with many people in mind? How did that change as you talked about once Cincinnati was secure? Talk a little bit about that.
I definitely know a lot of actors and love actors and very inspired by actors, but I didn't necessarily write with any person in mind. There were people and sort of characteristics and everything that were inspiring, but it really wasn't until we had the finished script and went into casting that it was just really fun to see where it could go, who could play the character, what different forms the character could take, what the actor brought. I'll let you finish on the casting because you did all of that. But as far as writing, I didn't have anybody specifically in mind.
Well, Emma, I'll call you out here because you're here, and you're on the poster. She was somebody who was reading. She was helping us. She was just reading for a role because, again, we hadn't cast it yet. And then while she was reading it, she just had such this wonderful innocence about her that just was a version of Josephine that after, I don't know, Emma, if I've ever told you, but after we did a reading, Erin and I had a bit of a sidebar, and we were like, so what do you think about it? Right? Okay. And we just kind of had this moment of like, all right, we got her locked down. We didn't ask her yet, but we were hoping that she had nothing else going on.
Still went through a whole casting process,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
kind of had her in mind after that.
We got really lucky with Elizabeth. She'd never done anything, and we were having a hard time locking Angie in. And this is something, I guess, to actors, is that I was having a lot of trouble with actors for the role of Angie, because a lot of actors were telling me no. They came in for Josephine, but I thought they would be a good Angie, and I actually got no's. They were like, no, I don't. It's leads or nothing for me. I don't do the smaller roles. And I'm like, let me check your resume. I don't know how you're okay. And like, you know, I mean, so. And yeah, she was a smaller character. She wasn't small, but she was smaller. And then we were in Cincinnati, and we were 2 weeks out, and we were like, God, we gotta find that Angie. And Elizabeth was having a really hard time with me, next to me, because she was reading with me, and she'd have friends come in, and other actors, local actors, would come in, and they were good, but she would leave, and before I could say anything, Elizabeth would turn and she'd be like, I don't get it. I don't know why they're not getting it. Angie's a good guy. Why is she not? And she had a relationship with Angie. It's just understanding of Angie that there's this empathy with this character that no one else was bringing more. She actually knew more about Angie than I did. And I was like, I know that you don't, this is all new for you, but do you want to just get in front of the camera? Just, some of the words, just, because she was reading with them. Do you mind just doing a few? And she was a good sport, and she said, yeah. And the moment she started speaking as Angie, the moment was one of those phone calls I called, and I said, hey, you know how Angie's a smaller character? Like, what if she became like a third of the story, and be the opposite, the other side of the coin of Josephine, which is something I didn't realize we didn't have until we casted Angie, and I was like, oh.
Seemed like such an obvious thing after we found Elizabeth, and her just reading the character and giving that character so much life. It was like, oh, of course. I have sisters. Like, of course, like, she should be a huge part of her life, and a huge part of why, Claire needed Jo, and why Jo was created, because her sister, wasn't there in the way that she needed her. And so it was really exciting to see how an actor could, as a writer, just completely opened my eyes to something that was right under my nose that I wasn't taking advantage of, that I wasn't giving that character the space that character deserved.
Yeah, and it only really got there because she loved the character. I mean, a lot of times when you're casting, you hear a lot of times an actor will come in and say, I love the script, and I mean, that's cool. But what really resonated was her love for Angie. Like, she had this just like protective nature of this character. Like, why is nobody else getting this right? Why is nobody else really understanding what she's going through? She went through all these things, and they're not getting there with her. It was upsetting her. Like, she was legitimately upset with that. and so she had such a love for the character first that was so, as a director, so attractive, because it was so like, here's somebody we can get on the day, and when something goes wrong, because it will, or something shows up that we didn't expect and it's a good thing, she'll be able to play with me, and play with the other actors, and so that was really nice.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about pre-production, because obviously you're not the only filmmakers to choose to not shoot in Los Angeles, so it's not rocket science. But what were some of the lessons learned? You're like, if you shoot somewhere you don't live, remember this.
It was a lot harder to find experienced people. Yes. And we were really lucky, like incredibly lucky, that the people that we did find were amazing and stepped up and were able to deliver and were able to adjust and just run with it, because we ended up trying to actually shoot a short film in Cincinnati like a year later, and it kind of just fell apart. And so we were sort of like, we got really lucky that we met the people and were able to get the crew, and because we knew that trading off not shooting in LA. Like, we had a lot of LA actors audition and everything, but we knew that it would be more difficult logistically to get them. It'd be more difficult to get the talent and the crew behind the camera as well. But that was sort of the risk we were willing to take. And for us, luckily, it worked out, and we were able to get the people. But that's something that, it's hard to house people. It's hard to make sure that you can get the equipment and the people. I would say the most is just being able to get the the experience, and every city has filmmakers, so there is that. But a lot of times it's people you haven't worked with before, which is a little scary. But then you definitely find your people who are your like go-to person. You're like, I know I can trust you. You're amazing. I will hire you forever.
There are, she said there's talent everywhere. It's not just in Los Angeles or New York. Every city has them. But in our case, like other big films, were kind of passing through and sort of sucked up all the people who do work locally. And so what we were left with wasn't like they're not scraps. They were they were very talented people. They just didn't have the experience yet to walk into a room and then be like, look at my resume, hire me. It was completely on like trust and hope and necessity, really, and a lot of times
Passion.
Yeah, and like any film like this, it usually is like 5-6 people wearing the hats of 10 other jobs, and it's you kind of. We shot for 12 days, 6 days, 1 day off, 6 days, and so we were moving at breakneck speeds, and so we didn't really have time for people to not do the job. And so what ended up happening was when somebody was falling behind, somebody else just grabbed the job and we moved on, or picked them up and helped them along. And thankfully we didn't have too much of that. Most of the people a lot of people on this film, this was their first time doing this thing ever. Like they've never done anything like this. And so they just thankfully had the aptitude to get up to speed quickly and then just, be able to get the thing done.
Were any of you guys from Cincinnati, or
Yeah.
Okay, so there was some familiarity.
I was from Cincinnati, and then Elizabeth is from Cincy, and then Dan, the other producer, he's from Cincinnati. And so the three of us had, thankfully, family and friends and such that we could sort of help facilitate production. Like one time I was on the porch shooting the porch scene with Joe in the very beginning of the movie, and while we were shooting, my mom pulls up, and because she was bringing catering, and so like she brought lunch, and she doesn't know anything about anything and about what we're doing, and she just sees me on the porch, and I'm crew, and we're shooting, and it's a real thing here.
Rehearsing.
Yeah, and she just stops the car at the street, and she just yells, "Ryan, Ryan!" And I was like, "Oh my God, Mom!" I'm shooting, so yeah, like it was a lot of that, a lot of love, yeah, which is necessary, because when you're 16, 17-hour days. And everybody is told it would be 12-hour days, and they don't really know what they're doing it for. You need that sort of camaraderie and love on set. It's the only way to get it done.
We had a really, really good cast and crew, like a lot of fun. Everybody got along. Some of them, it was their first movies, and they were like, "Yeah, this is amazing. It's always like this." I'm like, "It's not always like this."
And you have mom's cooking, so you can't complain about that. You talked about 12 shooting days. Talk about locations, because you mentioned earlier there's a lot of locations. Talk about you said you were there a little earlier probably to scout. Talk a little bit about that and kind of the process.
It was just the process of walking up to places and saying, "Hey, I like what you're doing here. Can I take it over?" And a lot of times this was not in Los Angeles or New York, so they don't really know what they're saying yes to, which was to our benefit, because there were a couple times they were like, "God, you're still here?" And you're like, "Yeah, you don't know when you say yes to a production that we're going to be there for 12 hours, or 14 hours." So we got really lucky with the people in Cincinnati. They were very, very, very open. We had the restaurant that Angie was working in the beginning. We shot there one night, and the lady who was the owner, she just gave me the keys and said, "I'll be back tonight," and just left. And
left
so,
us a bunch of coffee too.
Yeah, she's here's coffee. And so I was walking. I'd never been in someone's kitchen before, like a restaurant kitchen before, and so I felt like I was breaking and entering, but I had the keys, so I just walked in, and I was like, "Wow, this is what it's like." But no cameras, no nothing. They just said, "Here you go. You'll see it, 2 in the morning." And you're like, okay, so that's not normal, but
so friendly.
Yeah. So we thankfully had very, very, very accommodating locations, which was necessary for 12 days, and I don't know how many locations we had, like 10 or 12, but.
So we saw the final product, but obviously a lot of things happened behind the scenes to make the cuts and the scenes that you did. So is there any stories of the dog stopped barking for 5 seconds, or the cop swinging by?
Oh, the cop swinging by.
We do have a cop story.
There's usually one.
Well, but this goes the other way. This again plays to the openness of the city. And just briefly, like we had shot one night at the, so where the brother-in-law, the cop, his office was actually the police chief of this really small little town. In fact, they have a train that goes right through the middle of it, and if there's an emergency and a train is going through, they can't get to the emergency, and so they have to call in like the neighbor town, and then they send a cop because I mean this is, you know, we're a little off the grid here, but they it's a cute little town. But they had the night before we were shooting there, and the next night was the big fight scene outside with Joe and Claire in the car, and we got really lucky. It rained, and so it had that beautiful water look that people pay a lot of money for, and we just got it for free. And and so you know, so there's a small little town, and the producer, his mom is actually on the Chamber of Commerce or something. She has a map of that little village. For events where they can plug in. So it was basically like just an outlet map of this little downtown area. And she gave it to us. And so when we showed up, it was like, I think we were waiting for it to get dark. It was about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And we showed up and we just started plugging lights into the city and then just started putting our lights on buildings. And some of these were residents. And we were just throwing them up. And we're like, we're just gonna keep doing it until someone tells us to stop. And it just rained. It was beautiful. Like I said, it was like, oh my God. And so we get everything set up. The car is there and the actors are ready. Everyone's ready to go. And the cop pulls up and I'm like, oh, no, we got so close. And out comes the police chief of all people. And I walk over. I'm like, hey, Dave. And he's like, hey, so you guys left your Cliff Bars in my office. Do you want me to go get them? I was like, no, no, that's not true. This is not real. And so I was like, no, those are for your guys. You know, thanks for everything. And he was like, oh, great. Yeah, great. Well, you know what? Have a great shoot, you know, and we'll see you later. And I was like,
let us know if you need anything.
This is ridiculous. And so like, yeah, like I can say it now because we did it, but we didn't have any permission from anyone. We were just like, all right, sure, Alex. And so
it was like having our own backlot. It was
yeah,
great.
It was beautiful. It was a beautiful shot. In fact, that was the one shot in the film that I put in just for personal reasons. That it didn't really fit the flow of the film, but it's short enough that it didn't really matter. It was the establishing shot of the car by its, just out in the wide after that scene's over. And I only put it in there because I just thought it was so pretty. And it was one of those moments, and a lot of directors will say, I'm fighting for this shot because you have no idea in production what we had to go through. And I'm not usually like that because it's, you're not able to tell people while you're watching your film. Now pay attention to that shot because you won't believe how hard that was. Like they just don't care. And so, but that was a small little. I was like, that's going in, because it just was so much fun to shoot in Glendale, Ohio, just because it was so friendly. Yeah.
Nice. So, writer, director, producer, all that kind of stuff. Talk about wearing multiple hats, because obviously you want to build a team, but you're always doing things. So when we come to production and you have to be the actor and you have to be the director, but yet you still have to worry about the truck and the thing and tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. Talk about balancing all that.
I'll speak first, and I'll take over. Or you take over because I'm talking a lot. Just the truck. I'll talk about that because
there is a truck. Okay.
There is a truck, but it wasn't actually a real truck. It was a converted minivan that was a handicap van, and so it was really low, so they can let the ramp down, and which it didn't make sense to. We didn't realize that when you put hundreds of pounds of gear into this van, it's going to lower, and so if it's already lowered. Now you're hitting the ground, and so we had all of our gear in this one van, and because we didn't normally stay at one location for too many days, and so we were constantly packing, striking set, loading the van, and then bringing it to the next set the next day, and so I don't know why we didn't think of this. We didn't have a driver for this stuff, so it was me. So like at the end of the shoot, at like 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm driving this van in the highway. On the highway, and it is hitting the ground, and like parts of the muffler coming off, and like I'm driving so slowly. I'm like, you know, and I finally get in home where I was staying, and then I would hit the script and I would do all of my prep for the next day, because, you know, things had changed and we were, you know, going a different direction or whatever. And so I would get to bed around 4 or 5 and then get up at like 7 and then get back to set in this van. And because I had to be the first one there because I had the van. I don't know why we gave the director the van, but we did. And so
Because you were the producer at that time.
I was the last one there and the first one there, so I had no, you know, it was my prep time was basically when one would sleep. And so yeah, that was miserable. That was the first thing I was like, whenever I do this again, we're getting a driver, we're getting a real van, you know. So anyway.
Yeah, for me it was interesting sometimes because I would get a lot of questions and I'd be like, well, because I was a writer, so I get a lot of questions from crew, and I would just be like, I don't know anymore. It's his movie now. Like, go ask the director. So sometimes that was kind of weird to get questions, but it also was hard because the crew would start to see me as the actor a lot. But then as soon as we were striking set, there's no way the producer and me was going to sit back while everybody was carrying heavy sandbags and lifting everything up, and they just worked so hard, and I felt so guilty because they're all here because I wrote this movie. So, you know, I got to go help them, you know. So then they would, you know, sometimes they'd be like, what are you doing? Put that down, put that down. I'm like, no, I'm producer now. I'm going to be carrying the stuff, and believe me, I won't hurt myself. I know I'll be very careful, but I'll carry the lighter stuff. I'll do simpler tasks, but there's no way that I'm not going to, like, help pack up like crafty, because, you know, you guys are all here because I wrote this movie, so I need to take care of you. So the producer side would come out and just be like, no, I need to make sure everybody's taken care of and nobody's overworked and everybody's happy. So that was, you know, hard for other people, but not hard for me to switch between the two.
Cool. Let's move into post a little bit. As we talk in the green room, you guys have a lot of advice, so we'll jump into it. First, I always like to talk about the editor. Did you have the editor on board before post, or was it something after post, and kind of talk about pros and cons to that?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes to all post, in that we didn't prepare for anything after. The experience that we had on this film was always trying to play catch up, and so by the time we got done with production, we were like, okay, now what do we do? And then we got an editor, and like I said, she was amazing, Mikey. She was so good. And then we got through picture cut, and then we're like, well, now what do we do? Well, we got to get sound. And so we never had anybody before we needed them, or before they would sign on. And so there are many times when each person that signed on would say, you know, if you brought me on a little earlier, I could have told you to do this one thing differently, and it would have set you on a course that would have saved us a lot of time and money. And that goes all the way through festivals, you know, all the way through the end, having that in mind, what you're wanting to actually do with the film. If you're doing festivals, which festivals? Are you doing VOD? Are you doing it for like to pitch another film? Have that in place so that you can make decisions, I mean, as early as script, to say, okay, I know I'm going to be doing, you know, these indie festival circuits. I know I'm going to be aiming for this, and I know that they're going to want a name. I know they're going to want music. I know they're going to want, you know, ensemble, or they're going to want somebody who, you know, is whatever. And so, if the earlier you're aware of what your end is, it's always easier. It's always cheaper. It's always more fluid, more natural. Anyway, so yeah, we were always one step behind. So that was a big no.
What were some of the specifics, maybe the editor or sound or color correction kind of mentioned? You're like, oh, this is something we're going to think about for the next film that we did.
Sound is how important it is. I knew, but because I went through film school, and they would always say sound is half your film. And that's such a clever way to say that. Oh, it's half your movie. Of course it is, it's sound. But it really is half your movie. I mean, like, so much, so you can get so many things wrong with the picture. You know, the color can be weird, or the shot can be weird, or a cut can be weird. But the moment the sound drops the moment the sound does anything weird, it yanks you out, and it's hard to get back in. You kind of have to actually actively forgive it and get back into the movie.
Yeah, I think there's a somewhat of a forgiveness from the audience as far as, like, if a cut's kind of weird, or maybe there's something, you know, that might take you out for slightly a second, you know, but usually with picture and story, people are pretty willing to forgive it. But the minute that you hear any bit of wrong sound, it completely, like, destroys the facade. You know, it takes you out of that moment.
Bad ADR.
Yeah.
Or just the wrong sound. Just like, that's not what that door would sound like,
Shoes even on the ground, it can just completely rip you out of the moment.
Like, that's a lot of walking, who's, like, who's doing all the stomping around,
Or even like something, there's a movie I think we saw at a film festival, I can't remember now, but there was like a plate that was thrown and it was so loud. And I was like, oh, okay, there's an example. That sound just took me completely out of the movie because what they threw didn't look that big or heavy. And it completely, destroyed any sort of believability that I had.
But to that, I'm just going to cut you off, but these are all things of why you shouldn't neglect sound, but there's a lot of reasons why you should embrace it, because there's a lot of positive that came from when we, so the guys who did who did all of our mission post, they're awesome. They're in Burbank. Well, anyway, they're in Los Angeles. And there were a lot of parts of this movie that were there, but I didn't realize how much there they were until they got a chance to do what they do, which was beautiful. It was so much fun working with professional sound people, because they see things in your film that, of course, are there because you were going for it, but they're not as much there as you thought they were, or they are more there than you thought they were. And then you see them punch it up. Or like, for one quick example was, what shot was it when they dropped the sound out? That was
when I'm looking at the mom through the door.
Yeah. There was
or the last shot of the film.
The last shot actually is the one. So the last shot in the film when they, I always knew that shot. It was the first thing I read was that when we first read the script, the end was my first shot I had in mind, and that's why I love the film, because it was just that moment when she decides to embrace Joe, and for the first time we jump out of her perspective and we see her for what she really is, what Angie's perspective and everyone else's perspective would be, and how kind of hard that is to see once we've accepted her, and once we're kind of rooting for that to be the way, like we're wanting Claire to go with Joe, but finding out what that really means should be a little difficult to kind of to accept. But once we're shown it, but sound, I had this whole discussion with them about this moment, and they said, what we should do? Why don't we drop all the sounds back? So that our perspective, it encourages that perspective where we're no longer with them. We're back. So when that door shuts and they drive off, it's further away. In fact, they had the idea, and I was like, let's go further. Let's go even further back. But yeah, it was just one of those moments when sound really elevated a part of the story that I was in love with from the beginning, and it was just such a fantastic moment to be like, yeah, it worked. Which is great when something actually works.
Nice. Let's talk about film festivals, because you have a lot of thoughts on that journey, which were amazing, and I want our audience to hear that. So just kind of, I'll let you guys run with your thoughts about film festivals and what you want to share about that.
Film festivals, they are amazing and also terrible for me personally. We kind of have this running joke through the entire film process, because I've learned so much. And when I first started writing, I'm like, this is the hard part. I just got to finish the script. This is the hard part because it's just me doing it, getting it done. And then it was like, oh no, getting the money. That's the hard part. And then, oh no, actually getting the movie made, actually shooting it is the hard part. So every time we've come to it, it's kind of been a joke of like, oh no, this is the hard part. And so you get to the film festival and you think like, that's the moment that, all your hard work is going to pay off and everything. And then you get there and you realize just how much hard work it still is to market and get people to care about your movie and get people to come out and see it, because to be honest, nobody cares about your movie as much as you do. And you realize that very quickly, like, yeah, there's people that support it and everything, but there's so many movies and there's so much good content out there. It's really hard to generate excitement and get people to come see your movie. So for me, that's sort of out of my comfort zone. But it's such an amazing experience to meet other filmmakers who can just be like, oh yeah, sound, and just share that experience with other people who have been through the trenches and know exactly how much work and passion and sweat and tears and blood, like everything that goes in to making a movie, just as much hard work as goes in. It's just so great to meet other people. And then also just the knowing that, so I started writing because part of my frustration with the acting was not having control. Like, it'd be like, you're great, we love you, but you're not quite right, or, we need to go with this other person because they look less like the other character that we already cast. These random things that you have absolutely no control over. Then you get to a film festival and it's like, you get a letter that's like, you were actually my personal favorite, but we already have 2 other films that we've already programmed that are kind of like you. So you kind of get back into that where you're like, oh no, but festival programmers and the people there, they want you to succeed. They love your movie. They programmed it for a reason, and they are just a wealth of knowledge and experience and help, and we've just learned so much and met so many amazing people that it's been really rewarding to even just take it in front of a live audience and be able to do Q&As and see what works and see what doesn't work. It's really rewarding, to do that experience.
Yeah. I would say one thing for those who are looking at the festival circuits is that there are a lot of really good film festivals across the board, the big ones, middle ones, small ones. There's also a lot of film festivals that are happy to take your money but have no intention of programming your film. And so it's hard to figure out sometimes if this film festival is one. There's a few I have in mind that where they will invite basically most of their films, and they'll program maybe 2 or 1 from the thousands that they get submitted to them. And so those are ones you want to avoid. Those are the ones you're kind of like, all right, you just want my money. But there's a great article that was written by another director, Stephen Elliott. I would look him up to try that. He kind of lists them out. He does a lot of research as far as that kind of thing. But like Erin said, there's the programmers want you to succeed, but it is a business. They have to fill their seats, and so they have to make sure they program films that are going to fill seats. And so they program films. They try to program as many films as they love, but they also need to program films that will sort of round out their lineup or pull in bigger audiences. So like if you're up against like our film is a bit smaller, if we were up against, say, another film that was much larger, they might think, oh, that one has more general appeal, so we'll bring that in. But it might be where they have so many of those that, like Erin was saying, there's not a lot of control you're bringing to the game here, like an actor. Like, you don't have any control in the audition. Like, you just go and do the audition, that's kind of your job. They always say, frame it that way. Your job is to audition, because once it's there, then you've done it. Like, that's all you can do, because you might not be tall enough, or you might be too short, or not short enough, or you might look too much like another person that they wanted to cast. And same with the films. They might this year need a film that's 72 minutes, black and white, about a girl who's imaginary, or it might be the year that they had 2 films already that they're programmed that's about imaginary friends. So you just don't have any control over that. Yeah, so just research and then keep at it.
Lots of research.
Yeah.
Great. We always like to wrap it up with a golden nugget question, kind of like one lesson that you kind of took away that you're like, okay, if you don't remember anything about tonight, remember this as you move forward in your filmmaking career, which I know is a big question. So we'll kind of take it from the writer, actor, producer, and then the director, producer kind of mindset of like and it can obviously be more than one, but just kind of here are some like kind of benchmark things that maybe you're taking to your next film, or you would encourage filmmakers to take to their film.
I would say that it might sound a little douchey, but like when I was first writing, it was like, I want to write a story that I want to write, and I want to tell a story I want to tell. But I would tell myself then that you're not selling yourself short by putting in certain things that can help you succeed later. So knowing, if you do all your research and you know that films that have gone through festivals and have performed a little better than other films had 1 or 2 things in common, like a really great, like we talked about earlier, like a really great soundtrack, or one actor who you could at least put in parentheses that people will be like, oh, we've seen them in something. Just small things like that from the beginning that can help you sell your film later. The thing that is against my grain again is like the idea of marketing it, how to sell it. When you're doing it on your own, like, you are everything. You are the only, like I said, you're the person that has the passion, that loves the movie. So you're the one that needs to know how to sell it and how to get other people excited. So even though that stuff's not really maybe the things that draws you to making a movie, but it's also the things that will make it a lot easier for you to get an audience to see your film, because at the end of the day, that you still need an audience. You know, I mean, if you can make movies for yourself, sure, go make them and be happy. But if you're wanting to progress and have a career and get paid to do it, you have to have an audience. So just having those ideas in place from the very beginning of what elements can help me sell this, without compromising what you want to do, I think is really important to sort of see where you can amp up some of the elements to really take advantage of what you have and how you can turn that into getting an audience and selling it.
Probably from a director's perspective, from the very beginning to even now, you always have an idea of what you're going to do. You have an idea of what the film should be, or what that day is going to be like, or what this moment's going to be like. And plenty of times it is absolutely never going to be that. Either it's just not going to be as much as that, or it's just going to be something completely different. And so all the time, I'm sure you all know that all the time you're having to adjust, pivot, maneuver, make lemonade in a way. And so the thing that I would probably say was the strongest piece of advice I would give myself doing it again, is to be flexible, but to be as honest with yourself as you can be. And so when you're flexible, you're open to change, you're open to new things, new input. That was one of my most favorite things about filmmaking, is that it's so collaborative. So many things that weren't there before this one person came along, and they said, you know what would be great, would be this. And you're like, oh my God, that's brilliant. What if actually we went there? And then, off you go, and it's wonderful. But during all of that, while you're being open and flexible, just to try to stay as honest with yourself as possible, because just as a director, since you're kind of involved with all of the decisions, or most of the decisions, as long as you are being as honest with yourself as you can, then they'll all be sort of a part of the same movie. And that was something that was extremely helpful when we were getting so far kind of down these paths on the day, or in post, we were just kind of cutting crazy. And, and when we put it all back together, even though we had gone off the path as much as we had, it felt still part of the same movie, because we always had the same sort of voice, the same perspective. And so just make sure that you don't lose yourself in all the change and all those moments when you have to pivot or have to become something different. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's give them a hand and say thanks for sharing their story. Thank you.
Thank you.